Hello, and welcome to the Trojan Entertainment Network's first virtual town hall forum with our guest, Congressman Adam Schiff. I'm TEN's founder, Jimmy Kelly. For a decade and counting, TEN has been providing live networking events, panels featuring industry leaders, and other career resources for USC alumni working in entertainment. We're 100% volunteer run by our members, and many of us, myself included as a screenwriter, are self-employed. The COVID-19 pandemic has especially hurt those in the entertainment community who have seen the loss of jobs and income due to the shuttering of productions and live events. That's had us thinking a lot about the new stimulus bill passed in response to the economic impact of COVID-19, including its unprecedented provisions to support self-employed professionals. These provisions were championed in large part by Congressman Adam Schiff. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Jimmy, it's great to be with you. I appreciate your putting together this conference and know a great many people within your network. In fact, my brother David McMillan works in the industry as a proud graduate of SC Film School. So I've been very much looking forward to having this chance to talk to your members.
That's fantastic. Fight on to him. So to get started, can you give us some insight into, under normal circumstances, what the relationship is between a congressman representing a district like yours and the entertainment industry, both in terms of companies and the individual constituents who represent this industry?
Well, I probably have more people in the industry as my constituents than any other member of Congress. It's a great source of pride for me. This has been true since I was in the state Senate many years ago. And of course, what it does is it makes you attuned to the issues that are particularly important to the industry. And over the years, they've been everything from runaway production to intellectual property theft. I've been in legislative office long enough to remember the pre-file sharing days when IP was a much lesser concern, still a concern, but more a concern for studio executives than it was for everyone in the industry. But as people started to lose their livelihood through intellectual property theft, through runaway production, those became very prominent issues. And frankly, I have the same challenge in representing my constituents on those issues that I have found with representing my constituents today that are working in the freelance area or as contract workers or in the gig component of the industry. Because the perception in Sacramento when I was a state legislator, the perception in Washington as a member of Congress is that those entertainment industry problems are problems for celebrities. And we don't need to really be concerned with them. They're all very wealthy. They're doing just fine. They don't need the government to be concerned about anything that impacts them. And of course, it's been a constant process of education to inform legislators that no, actually, most of the people that work in the industry are working day to day, week to week, just trying to get by and make a living, many of which you've never heard their names, but they're responsible for that creative work product that you love so much and people around the world enjoy. And frankly, people right now are living off of as they stream content to occupy their time at home. But we have worked together with the industry, with people like yourself, to help those in the industry advocate for themselves, be part of that member education. And that involves visits to Washington, visits to our district office. It involves town hall meetings with different organizations within the industry. Most of them have been live. This is one of my first virtual ones with the industry. But that communication is really important, and obviously it's important that it take place outside of the Los Angeles members, anywhere the industry can be found. And I know we'll talk about that in a bit, but to have the success that we ended up having in the last relief bill, it was necessary to reach out to other members in other parts of the country that also have a vibrant entertainment industry segment to make sure that they would, people in the industry that needed help would get the help in that bill.
Well, let's get right into what people have tuned in for, and that's to learn about this bill. Can you provide an overview on the work you've been doing and how this bill will impact the entertainment industry?
I'd be happy to. And let me start out by giving you a couple resources. I'll start out with my own website. If there are questions that your members have that we don't get to today, or they want to look for more information or follow up on things that we discussed, it's at schiff.house.gov. The SBA is also a critical website for those that are in small businesses in the industry. And of course, the Employment Development Department of the California state government is another critical website for those that will need to apply for unemployment compensation. But in terms of the response, we have in very quick succession now taken up 3 major bills in Congress. It's been obviously a challenge because of the requirement that we also social distance. The first 2 bills were to push out testing to make sure the resources were there for hospitals and clinics and healthcare workers to ramp up all the needed supplies, to press the administration on implementing the Defense Production Act to beef up production of ventilators. Obviously, a lot of problems there, which we can talk about later in the call if you like. But the final bill, the third bill, was really designed to not only address remaining challenges to the healthcare system, and many of the hospitals are going to be besieged if they're not already, but also to provide an economic lifeline to really hundreds of millions of people in the country who are facing dire economic straits now that we're all told we can't leave the house. And so the predominant issue for the industry, at least one of the most significant, is because of the unique nature of the work in the industry where people may not have an employer day in, day out, week after week, but may go from contract to contract, show to show, commercial to commercial, job to job. They may have been completely left out of unemployment compensation. And so our priority was to expand unemployment compensation to cover those that work in non-traditional employment, like in the industry. Now, obviously, it's not confined to the entertainment industry, and people in the gig economy have many of the same issues. But we worked on provisions that would allow people in the industry to apply for unemployment compensation. And one of the things the bill did was it provided an enhanced unemployment benefit. So in the state of California, you might get up to $400 a week in unemployment compensation. The federal government added an additional $600 a week, so probably the maximum you could get would be about $1,000 a week. And those benefits are now available to people in the industry when they might not have been otherwise. Now, there still be issues of calculation of those benefits. And there were some things that we wanted in the bill that we weren't completely successful in. Those benefits will largely be calculated on the basis of your income last year. We tried to make provision that if you had a contract that got canceled, you could use the amount you were going to earn in the forthcoming contract. We were only partially successful in that. If you have a work that got canceled, that is a characteristic to qualify you to get unemployment compensation, even if that's not used for the determination of the amount of that compensation. Ultimately, there are still unanswered questions in terms of calculation of benefits. You'll have to handle those on, as you imagine, an individualized basis with the Employment Development Department of the state of California. But by and large, we were very successful in covering, I think, the vast majority of people that have this non-traditional work in the industry. And we can talk more about that as well.
Okay, great. And another big part of the package is small business loans. You touched on this briefly. So many entertainment companies, when we say small business, we mean literally 1 or 2 employees. And when you run a company that small, you are, you're more financially at risk during hard times. So I want to look at things like loan forgiveness from these small business loans. What if you are one of those very small companies that's barely getting by, and you're going to have a tough time digging out of this?
This is a very important piece of the relief legislation. There are several parts of this. There's the unemployment compensation part, which we've been talking about. There's the cash assistance, the direct cash payments that will go out. of $1,600, I'm sorry, $1,200 or $600 for children. Those will go to people regardless of the nature of their work. And those are go out on the basis of being capped if you earn over, if you're a couple, if you earn over 198,000, or if you're an individual I'm sorry, I've got that wrong, got the limits wrong. But I think they phase out at 198,000 for a couple and half that amount for an individual. The full amount, I think you would get if you earn 75,000 as an individual or less, or 150,000 as a couple or less. But the third category are for small businesses. And here you have the small business owners, and you have those on the payroll of the small business. And we put about $377 billion to try to help people in these categories. And there are three different programs, at least three through the SBA. The largest is the Payroll Protection Program, PPP. And essentially that allows small businesses to keep their employees on the payroll and apply for loans that are forgivable if they keep people on their payroll. And so, frankly, this is in part what I was urging in a much bigger scale, and that is, in addition to advocating for the industry and its workers and the fashion we talked about, I was advocating that we follow the model that Britain and some of the Nordic countries are using, which is have the government guarantee payroll. It could be done quite uniformly. It wouldn't matter what kind of business you were in, but it would be much less disruptive if people don't lose their job, and then after we're over the worst of the virus, have to look for a job, have to suffer the indignity of losing their job. We did this in a significant piece for small business. And so if you're a small business person, you should reach out to the SBA. And I would do so immediately to begin your application. And you can qualify for assistance to continue making payroll to your employees. Those funds can also be used for payment of rent and payment of utilities. There's another program through SBA for a disaster relief loan. That loan is also forgivable. You can get an advance on that loan, and even if you don't qualify for the loan, you don't have to repay the advance. There's also tax credits you can get for payroll. So there are at least three big programs through the SBA that will provide assistance for people in the category that you're talking about. There are also experts through SBA that receive funding to help advise you, that you can call these experts that the SBA can link you with, and they can tell you, you can tell them about your business, and they can say, okay, this is what I would recommend to you. I would apply first for the disaster relief, and then I would apply for this. They can help prescribe the best form of relief for you. And so that's a vital resource for all small businesses.
Yeah. Let's switch from businesses to individuals, because a key part of this bill and what has inspired a lot of interest among artists and other freelancers is that it proposes to extend unemployment benefits to uniquely classified workers who up until now have not qualified for unemployment. Why is this important, and why has it taken until now to address this issue?
It's a very good question, and it's important because there are so many millions of Americans, many of whom do work in the industry, but many work in other industries as well, who don't have traditional employment. And they make a good living, or they at least get by, but they don't work for the same firm every week of the year, year after year after year. And normally they would not be covered by unemployment compensation. Now they will be. And so this was very important. One of the things that this crisis is revealing are holes in the system. In a normal circumstance, if you are one of these freelance workers and your work dries up, your contract goes away, your pilot gets canceled, you don't get unemployment. And not like your neighbor who works for a traditional employer. Now in this emergency legislation, we've dealt with that so that you will be covered. But you should be covered whether it's an emergency like this or not. And so this reveals, I think, one of the holes in the system. Now we also have to figure out, how people pay into the system if they're not paying in through their employer or their employer's not paying in. So we're going to need to figure that out too. But it does reveal a big hole in the unemployment compensation system. We're also seeing, obviously, holes we knew about already in the healthcare system. So yes, we're paying for testing, but we're not completely paying for treatment. So you get tested, your test is paid for. You test positive, or maybe you test negative, but you're still really sick and you need medical care. If you don't have healthcare through an exchange and you don't have it through your employer, then you've got a real problem on your hands, and this is the problem with not having universal healthcare. So we are seeing, of course, the holes in our system for all their graphic nature in this crisis. But in this emergency legislation, we have been at least able to fill the hole when it comes to unemployment compensation. So you should be covered. There may be narrow circumstances where people are not covered, and it's important to let us know about that, those of us in elective office, because this won't be the last package. This is the third. It won't be the last. The speaker's already talking about things that we're going to need to take care of in the fourth package. We're going to obviously run into things that were not anticipated. And so your feedback is going to be really important.
Well, you just answered one of my big questions, which is, will there be more legislation on this issue? So it's great to hear that that work has already begun.
Yes, and it will take a number of different forms. The states are going to need more help than we were able to provide in the last package. I think we're going to need to do an awful lot more for the homeless. So we did include billions for the homeless and the unique health challenges facing the homeless population in this COVID crisis, because they can't shelter in place, or they can't shelter in what we think of as a traditional home. And we are trying to help, and the state and the city are working on finding hotels and motels and using convention centers and other facilities for shelter. But we're also dealing with staffing shortages of people that can check in on the homeless population if they're moved, for example, to a motel room somewhere. So I think there's going to be a lot more resources necessary for the homeless. There's going to be, I know, a great need remaining within the healthcare system. We may learn of others that are not covered by the economic relief that we provided. We are already hearing about the gap in that 17 and 18-year-olds are not covered by these cash payments, and many of those in college are going to face enormous difficulties now that their college and where they plan to live in college is no longer available. We also are looking in the next package to provide a stimulus to the economy, perhaps in the form of an infrastructure bill. I can tell you, and this is a phrase that I almost never hear myself saying, I was pleased to see in a presidential tweet that the president is supportive of an infrastructure bill. This puts him at odds with some of the Republican leadership in the Congress, but when we do get to the other side of this curve, investing in our decaying infrastructure is a great way to get the economy moving again.
Well, I want to circle back before we get into the town hall portion to a couple more quick questions about the unemployment benefits. You mentioned there could be potential gaps in qualifications. So I wanted to ask about one specific concern that affects a lot of our members, a lot of independent artists. Unemployment payments are typically calculated when someone is laid off from their job. Yet a big part of the entertainment community might be suffering from potential loss of income for jobs that weren't contractually guaranteed yet on projects that had yet to be financed. Independent film professionals are particularly vulnerable to this predicament. How will calculations for unemployment payments be done to figure out what they can receive?
Now, I believe the answer is this, but you'll have to, because it's so individual case specific, obviously.
I know a lot of this is still being worked out, of course.
Yes, and part of this will be determined by the state unemployment office, the EDD. But my understanding is that you will still be covered. Let's say that you had a contract and the contract went away because of the COVID crisis. Or you had a pilot and the pilot went away because of the COVID crisis. You will still be eligible for the unemployment compensation. That compensation, the amount of that compensation, is likely to be calculated on the basis of your income the previous year. But you will be eligible as if you lost your job, as long as you lost that work because of the COVID crisis. And I have to think, and I want to hear if it's otherwise, that the Employment Development Office in the state is going to liberally apply the eligibility criteria so that more people are covered and err on the side of covering people. And so, but if we find that that's not the case, then we can weigh in with the state to try to change it. Necessarily, we can address it legislatively. To give you one example, the Treasury Department, notwithstanding the specific language in that third relief package, was not going to send these cash stimulus checks to individuals who did not file tax returns last year or this year. Well, a lot of people on Social Security or who have a low income may not file tax returns or may not need to file tax returns, and they weren't supposed to have to file a return to get this cash payment. We weighed in with the Treasury Department and said, you know, this is, you're placing an intolerable burden on some of the lowest income people, a lot of them seniors, and they reversed course. So that was a situation where they had discretion, they exercised it poorly, and now they have exercised it in a better fashion. If we find that the State Employment Office is exercising their discretion in a way that is at odds with what the Congress intended in this bill, then we can weigh in with them as well.
Okay, great. And our town hall panel is getting ready right now. As they do, how does someone who qualifies for aid, be it unemployment benefits, small business loans, how do they sign up?
They would go online, and because these offices are not encouraging walk-ins, as you can imagine, almost all of this should be done online. You'll go to the SBA website, you'll go to the EDD California website. If you come to my website, schiff.house.gov, you'll find links for these other offices. But those are the two primary portals in terms of small business relief. Will be almost all run through the SBA. Unemployment compensation will be run entirely through each state's unemployment office. In California, that's the EDD.
Great. So Congressman Schiff, it's time now to bring in questions from TEN's members as presented by some of our volunteer alumni leaders. I'll hand it off to the current president of the Trojan Entertainment Network, Jason Lubin.
Thanks, Jimmy. And Adam, on behalf of TEN, I also want to thank you for participating in the town hall today. I'm a small business owner. I own my own lit management company, and I know a lot of the issues facing the industry. My question is from Cassie. She's a director editor who owns her own small production company. Well, there have been a lot of commitments by companies to pay their cast and crew and extension of unemployment. How will this be carried out for lost work for those who work job to job, such as in commercials, as opposed to on a specific show or film?
What you'll do, Cassie, is you'll apply for unemployment through the EDD, through the State Unemployment Office. And as we've been discussing, I think your benefit calculation will depend on what your income was for the previous year. So you should be covered, notwithstanding that your commercial work or other work may have gone away. And you may need to demonstrate that that work went away in part because of the COVID crisis. And if some of it went away, but others of it didn't go away, I think you still qualify. You may qualify for a lesser benefit, but you can get unemployment compensation, as I understand it, for part of your lost work. In terms of what that benefit will look like, I think that you'll qualify for the $600 federal enhancement benefit. That's $600 per week. In terms of how much of the state benefit you'll qualify for, it would be, I think, anywhere from the minimum of $125 to the maximum of $400 a week. It may be somewhere in between, depending on your particular work situation. But that's my understanding. The EDD will have a better, in the granular detail answer for you, but that's my understanding. But all of that you would apply for through the EDD.
Thank you.
Our next question will be presented by Yelena Podkolzina.
Congressman, thanks again for taking the time to speak with us today. I'm the director of events for 10, and I'm a freelance artist and actor myself. This question is from Brian, a casting assistant. One of the major issues facing many young people, especially those in entertainment, is their ability to pay rent. There has been relief given to homeowners for mortgage payments, but there has not been the same given for renters. Is this an issue being discussed, and is there a plan to handle?
Brian, yes, absolutely. This is being discussed, and we did provide some relief in the federal legislation. The hook that we used were federally backed mortgages. So if, for example, the person that is renting the property to you, your landlord, has a mortgage on that property that is federally insured, and if they have the mortgage, most of them are federally insured, then they're not permitted to evict you. They're not permitted to penalize you for non-payment of rent on time. So there are provisions in the federal legislation to protect you until you're able to make those rent payments. And furthermore, the state and the cities are also taking action. So depending on where you live, in Burbank, for example, I think there is a moratorium on evictions. I think Governor Newsom has also placed a different moratorium on evictions. And so there are protections in place. It is our hope, obviously, that if, for example, you're a small business owner, or you work for a small business, or you receive unemployment compensation, that you're able to pay for food and rent and basic necessities. But if you're not able to, then there is protection in the form of these moratoriums on eviction. I would also say this, because it will take some time for those cash payments to reach you, the cash stimulus checks of $1,200. It will take time to apply for unemployment compensation. You're probably getting your rent bill now, the first of the month, that you should reach out to your landlord. And if you're a homeowner and have a mortgage and can't make your mortgage payment, reach out to your bank. And similarly, your utility, if it's utility bill, many banks and other businesses are making provision for their clients, customers, renters, to try to help them as well. And so, you know, we're all going to have to be proactive in seeking help until we get through this. But there is provision in the federal legislation, and there is provision at the state and local level to protect people. The last thing we need right now are more homeless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's welcome Norman Hobson with another question.
Thank you again, Congressman, for your time.
I'm drinking from my my Stanford mug. I hope that's okay. If one of you sends me a Trojan mug, I'm happy to drink from that in the next town hall.
We'll forgive you for now. I'm the current outgoing president of 10. I'm a SAG rep and a current doctorate student at USC Trojan School. My question is from Kelly. Kelly's a marketing director. How will the stimulus checks be distributed if a person has filed taxes with direct deposit in 2018, but has not yet filed taxes in 2019?
If you filed taxes last year, then you should be covered in the sense that you should have no problem getting the check. And if you did it electronically and would get normally your refund, if you qualify for a refund electronically, you'll actually get your check quicker than anybody else. That is, people that file it the old-fashioned way with paper and end up getting a check in the mail. Those will take longer to arrive than people who file electronically. So if you are planning to file your returns now and there's been a postponement of the date by which you need to file your returns, but if you filed the old-fashioned way with paper last year, but you file now electronically, then I would presume that you might be able to get your check quicker because they'll use that electronic deposit to deposit your stimulus check as well. But you should be good in any event. If you filed taxes last year and you're taking advantage of the delay in when you need to file for this year, you should be fine. You should get your stimulus check.
Thank you.
Presenting next is Heather Humpelman.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm the Director of Membership for 10 and own a production company that specializes in communications work. This question is from Nick, an actor. Many people working in entertainment, especially creatives, have a second job or side gigs. How will having income from multiple sources, say 1099s and W-2s, affect them receiving aid?
Well, I think the way that it will affect them is, I guess, twofold. First, it will be part of what you'll show the California Unemployment Office, the EDD, about your income for last year, which will determine the benefit you get in unemployment this year as a result of the stimulus package. So those, whatever employment, whoever you work for, whatever your sources of income were, I presume will be aggregated for the purpose of determining how much you'll get in unemployment as a result of the legislation that we passed. And so I think that's the mechanism. Presumably if you filed your return and all of those 1099s went into your return from the last year, it should be fairly simple and straightforward because your income will be known. And it won't be necessary for you to do a whole lot of chasing down paperwork, which is probably nearly impossible these days. So it should be, I would hope, quite matter of fact, your income based on your work last year, and all of that would be taken into consideration in calculating your benefit through unemployment compensation.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Aaron Marlowe.
Hi, my name is Aaron Marlowe. I'm an actor and a writer. My question is from JP, a voice actor. As a result of Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, many of us in entertainment had to form loan-out corporations or lose the ability to write off our business expenses. Now, incorporated entertainment professionals are unable to claim unemployment like we could as individuals. Does the CARES bill accommodate incorporated individuals who are out of work? And if not, is there the possibility of including such relief in future bills?
The answer is you should be covered, but you may be covered by the small business provisions rather than the unemployment compensation provisions. So you may want to start out with the SBA, and that may be, frankly, a better vehicle for you anyway, if the payroll that you would be earning through the small business would be more than you would get in unemployment compensation. So you may want to start out with the SBA, see if you qualify for those forgivable loans to make payroll. I think you're allowed to make your own payroll as long as your own payroll isn't in excess, I think, of 100,000. And so that may be the place to start. If, for example, for some reason they say, no, you need to go the unemployment compensation route, then you should be covered through unemployment compensation. I would hope that you're not going to fall between the cracks between the two. You shouldn't. If that should be the case, I would definitely want to know, both to see whether we can weigh in with either the unemployment office or the SBA to make sure that one or the other is actually interpreting the law correctly, and as a last resort, if necessary, to make this part of any subsequent package that we take up to make sure that people that fall between those two provisions nonetheless are provided for.
Great, thank you very much.
Well, I gotta say, I think we got some pretty great questions from our members. We really appreciate it. We are going to get down to our final question now, because a lot of the problems our members are facing today, to be frank, are still going to be there after this pandemic has passed. Most people don't realize that filmmakers and other entertainment freelancers are essentially entrepreneurs and face the same barriers as many trying to start any kind of small business. How can 10 USC and our wider community of industry professionals work with your office and Congress to ensure that the issues brought forward by this current crisis aren't forgotten when it comes to the systemic issues that make hundreds of thousands of entertainment professionals financially insecure, both in times of crisis and when the economy is booming?
Well, it's a great question. And, I think what you're doing right now in reaching out this way and having this dialogue is going to be enormously important to continue even when we get through this crisis. Coronavirus is going to be with us for a while. We will face the worst of it, I imagine, over the next month to 2 months. And then we'll be on the other side of this curve. And obviously what we're doing now to try to flatten that curve will, I hope, avoid the worst outcomes by staving off a real crisis within our healthcare system. But I think we can expect that, much like after the main fire was put out, there are going to be hotspots that need to be put out over time as different communities in the country are affected at different times. And we'll see probably this virus come back in the fall. And until we have a vaccine, it won't be completely gone. So I think along the way, this will be an iterative process, and we may need to extend unemployment compensation further. We may need to address remedies for those that fall between the cracks of the support we're already providing. But then when this is truly behind us, we're going to need to continue to focus on these issues. I mean, the unemployment compensation system should cover you. It shouldn't be just for when there's a pandemic. So we'll want to work together with you. We'll need your voice to weigh in with Washington and Sacramento to make sure that we make systemic changes to unemployment compensation, to our safety net in general, to our healthcare system so that everyone has access to healthcare. Before all this really intensified, I was at the Munich National Security Conference, and of course, coronavirus was beginning to be a very heated topic. This was in early February. And in discussing some of these challenges, I remember in particular discussing this with the Norwegian, I believe it was the Prime Minister or the President, and she was talking about how their safety net, which is really very impressive, where their healthcare is provided, their college education is provided, it actually gives entrepreneurs, like people in the industry, the confidence to try new things, to be daring from a business point of view, to be creative from a business point of view, and not be too worried about failing because there's a net to catch them if they fail. So it gives them the greater ability to innovate, which I think is a really important point. And we should look for the same protection for those innovators in our economy as well. So I would say we're going to need to continue, intensify even our dialogue and discussion between elected officials and the industry to try to make sure that we not only get through this crisis, but we put in place a better and more comprehensive system in the future. The creative industries right now are saving us from madness as we're all cooped up in our homes, even if there is a fight over the remote control. But I'm so proud to represent so many talented people in the industry. It's been just a great source of satisfaction and enjoyment for me to meet and work with so many brilliant, creative people. So that work has to go on. I look forward to it. Finally, I just want to say, by way of encouragement, because I know how distressing these times can be. I was talking to one of my staff today who lives in Washington, D.C., works in my Capitol office, and she was saying that the D.C. police were driving down her street, blaring over the loudspeakers, "Stay inside, stay in your homes, avoid illness or death." And she said it was like a scene out of an apocalyptic movie. So I understand, we all do, what a worrying time this is. going to the grocery store and seeing people wearing masks. And thank goodness our grocery workers and our healthcare workers are still on the job. But we're going to get through this. We've been through more difficult things in the nation's history. This too shall pass. We will get through it. Unlike many other challenges we've had, this one is really calling on all of us right now to do our part in a very disciplined way, to follow the advice of the health experts, not to take unnecessary risks, to shelter in place, and we'll get through this. And so that work will come back, those jobs will come back. There's going to be a real appetite, not only for the streaming content that you're producing, but I think when this is all over, there's going to be a hunger for communal gathering again, to once again populate the movie theaters, which I know are also hard hit by this. And those SBA provisions, by the way, should be good for a lot of the movie theaters that have had to close their doors. So I look forward to the time when I can be back in the movie theater enjoying your great work. But in the meantime, stay healthy, stay safe, and thanks for giving us so much great content to listen to and to watch.
Well, Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you again to you and your staff. We also want to thank the 10 members who submitted questions, our presenters, and the USC Alumni Association for making this virtual town hall possible. And to all our members, let us know how 10 can continue to provide information and opportunities to connect at this uncertain time. Whatever shape our industry takes in the wake of what's happening now, we'll navigate it together. I've been Jimmy Kelly. Thanks for watching, and fight on.